Jason Aldean, Full Throttle Tour 2025, powered by Patriot Mobile. When the lights come on. Friday, September 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. With Nate Smith. You set my world on fire. And Ray Lynn. Jason Aldean. On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Jason Aldean Live.
Iowa Deer Classic, March 7th through the 9th, Iowa Event Center, Des Moines. Now 3 levels of hunting and shooting gear, land management, outfitters, and more. Big buck and shed contests, seminars, celebrities, archery shoots, family shows. Get tickets, win prizes at iowadeerclassic.com.
Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome to another episode of Legends and Listeners. Number 80 for us, Scott Dochterman from the Channel Seed Studios on this Thursday morning. Yes, I'm still counting the episodes. That's just how I keep my notes. So, episode 80. Made it 80, Scott. Chad Leistikow, Des Moines Register, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. We're with you every week, every Thursday on Iowa Everywhere. Scott, it's no secret we record these Wednesday night. That's so you guys can have them like at 5 a.m. for your commutes on Thursday or whenever Aiden posts them. But we are not long as we record this after the Hawkeye men actually kind of shocked us with an 84-73 win at Rutgers, first road win of the season. So we thought, what better time to kick off with some positive men's basketball coverage?
It's been the first time in a while we could do that, and yeah, it was a surprise to me because they haven't won or even really been close lately on the road. They've been pretty much all blowouts. And when you go to Rutgers, the first thing you notice is, Chad, that they have 2 lottery picks in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. The second thing I noticed about them is, yes, they got incredible talent, but that is – and Steve Peichel is a really good coach, and he's done really good things over the years. But that team has no chemistry whatsoever. It's hero ball. And Iowa did a nice job of not only defending, despite being shorthanded, out 2 of their better players, and kept fighting. And, you don't want to necessarily give teams flowers for competing, but I tell you what, this team has busted its ass the last 3 games. They lost to Purdue, but they competed hard against a really good team. It competed really well against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a better team probably anyway. But to go there and to play the same way, that's why you saw an emotional Fran McCaffrey and Peyton Sanford, because it matters. It matters to them. They care. And that does go for something at this time of year when you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but to still compete. It says the team is still invested, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, Peyton Sanford called it a culture win. Happy for him. He's had a tough year. Returned for his senior year. He's probably not had the year he wanted to performance-wise. It doesn't mean he's not going to have a nice pro career or whatever, but I think he was hoping for, an NCAA tournament run as a senior. Probably still not going to happen. Probably all the same conversations that you guys have been having before this win will still exist, but it's still a nice moment for this program, for this head coach. His guys are playing hard for him, whether that's his last season at Iowa or not. It has to enter your mind for sure. And these guys are competing, and that's the one thing that I wrote after Saturday's loss against Wisconsin. It was like, well, this team is now on the bubble for the Big Ten tournament. Okay. And that's not, that's just being realistic. They were going to need to pull off a win like this. Iowa comes in 4-8 in the Big Ten. Rutgers was 5-8 in the Big Ten. So huge head-to-head result if you're talking about getting into that top 15. And I know many people out there may be saying, yeah, rolling my eye, big deal, make the Big Ten tournament. But it's a way to extend your season. It's a way for these guys to have a chance. I mean, we've seen the middle of this Big Ten. It's big, but it's not elite. I mean, you could, even without Owen Freeman, you could get hot and make a run. I mean, Bryce Sanford's a good player, and I think this has opened his playing time up a little bit more. They really went with, they didn't have Thelwell tonight either, and and so it ended up being Harding, Dix, who was phenomenal, Sanford, and Dembele. Dembele played a nice road game. I mean, I thought one of the big moments of the second half was when Fran just got tired of Traore and then just put him on the bench, and then they went with those five pretty much the rest of the way. The second half box, Scott, was staggering. Iowa goes 20 of 34 from the floor at Rutgers. Now, they don't have the defensive team that they've typically had, but Iowa scores on 24 of 33 possessions in the second half. They were down 11 before the very last possession of the first half, 42-31. Scored at the buzzer, or right before the buzzer, I believe. I think it was Harding, right? And then they come out in the second half and go 51-31 in the second half. So, again, we're not throwing a parade for a team that's 5-8 in the Big Ten, but they showed some perseverance and they deserve credit.
Exactly. I mean, this is, we all know this is the Big Ten, and we will critique them, and we have critiqued them throughout the season for their lapses, whether it's in rebounding or defense or whatever. And, they deserve that. But then when they do something well, I think we deserve to prop them up and to win by 11. I mean, they only led for 12 minutes, but then they ended up winning by 11 because the first half was just yuck. I thought for both teams, but particularly Iowa, it was just like this back and forth, no semblance of basketball. It was like what you see at one of my elementary schools in Burlington and Salter. You just, what are you doing? But in the second half, Iowa got to figure it out. Iowa played a better game, and then you see the tenacity. Josh Dix is really becoming one of the better players in the Big Ten. And Peyton Sanford always has that ability. It's more about consistency with him. If he's streaky. And if he's good, he's somebody that can really bury just about any opponent. But, if he's not, then it becomes a really tough, grind for them. But I think in the moment, it's fair to enjoy this. And I think what I would recommend for fans now, because this is not going to be an easy rest of the season here. They do play a really tough schedule. There's one team that I think in Washington that they probably will be favored against. The rest of them, they may not be. Things can spiral out of control. But I think you should, if nothing else, appreciate that this team is still competing, because teams like this can easily fall apart and lose and go. And instead of finishing, with 5 wins, could have finished 4-16 out of the Big Ten tournament, but they're playing like they care. And that should at least make you feel like, what, I appreciate that.
Yeah, they're at Maryland, as McCaffrey says, on Sunday. Maryland's a really good team. That's going to be a tough game. If they somehow win that, then, maybe we'll have different conversations next week. But still, appreciate the moment for what it is. Remaining schedule, I guess we can go through that real quick for the Hawks if you want. At Maryland, and then they're home against Oregon on Wednesday, home against Washington on Saturday. So, a chance to, Oregon's one game ahead of Iowa as I speak right this second in the Big Ten standings. So, you never know if maybe jump them or tie them in the standings, and
that would be a big Big Ten win. I mean, because Oregon has fallen apart since they've entered the Big Ten. I mean, the grind of it has gotten to them, and they've lost some decent teams. But they're he brought up the schedule here, but I also think that's one that there's a matchup issue, I think, with Iowa, and that might be a little bit tough.
Sure. And then the last 4 we've talked about for quite some time: at Illinois, at Northwestern, home against Michigan State, at Nebraska. It's going to be tough to win any of those. Maybe Northwestern. That would be another one where you could seal your spot in the Big Ten tournament. Northwestern's one of those teams below Iowa right now at 4-10 in league play. So anyway, good chance after tonight that the Hawks will not end their season in the regular season. They may even have a winning season. We will see. They are now 14-10 overall. So very possible they go 16-15, something like that. So,
well, that's
something. I mean, it's, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they finish out, let's say they even win a Big Ten tournament game and they finish 17-16.
Yeah, sure. It's like Fran's second team, right? The one that they were one game over 500.
It says something. It's an accomplishment. It's like, we didn't do what we wanted to do. It was a struggle. We had injuries. We didn't play well in certain areas, but at least we had a winning season. Because again, there are goals that you try to reach, and I think that's one that you could get to. And if so desired, there are postseason opportunities if you reach that point. I don't know if you want them or not. I don't know if you want to go to the Crown in Vegas or the NIT, or I don't even know if the CBI still exists. But and even so, I don't know that I would want to do that one. But you have that chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think Drew Thelwell, Peyton Sanford, they're going to want to play as many games as humanly possible. And also was happy for Brock Harding tonight. He's had a tough go of it lately, and he had a really nice game. What he end up with 13 points, 7 assists. I mean, in place of Thelwell, 3 steals, 36 minutes. I mean, he looked overmatched physically out there defensively, but he gave it his all. So again, there's 12 good minutes on Iowa men's basketball. They deserve some props tonight as we talk. Anything else on that? You want to move on to the? No,
let's talk about the Iowa women. And you were there in Lincoln on Monday night. I'll kind of set this up for you, and you can take it from here. We were seeing a team that's been surging. Ever since it won the game at Washington. You were there for that. Came back, beat Northwestern in not a great performance. Then, of course, had the magical win against USC. But the meat and the most important games to me were the last 2. At Minnesota, at Nebraska. Those are teams on your block. Those are rivalry games. Those are games that determine whether you get to, forget the Big Ten, whether you get to the NCAA tournament. And they're against opponents that are out for you. And then they win both of those games fairly decisively. I thought that they controlled both of those games. They had opportunities to let it slip, and they still held on and were very competitive. Chad, what are your takeaways from what we've seen for Iowa women the last week, and then specifically on Monday when you were in Lincoln?
Yeah, great observation about the two games. Before those 2 games, I think we maybe set this up last week, if I recall correctly. Iowa was on the last 4 buys along with Minnesota and Nebraska on Charlie Cream's bracketology. So really those 2 wins to me, I mean, as long as they don't lose to Rutgers tonight, as you listen to the show, or Wisconsin at home in the season finale, that would put Iowa at 9-9 in Big Ten play. Even just those 2 victories, which would be enough to get them into the tournament without a first 4 situation. I mean, barring something unforeseen. I mean, they got the quality win over USC, like you said. And now these are 2 quad 1 road wins. So, they're 3-0 in February, Scott, and those are their 3 most impressive wins of the year, I would say, even more so than home against Iowa State and neutral Virginia Tech. I know those count pretty nicely as well, but these were really impressive performances. And I wrote about this a little bit Monday night, and it's a Bluter characteristic where her teams always, I mean, like, that's one thing about Iowa women's basketball that's really impressive, that they're always playing their best basketball late in the year. They figure things out. Everyone finds their roles, and like clockwork. I mean, the Caitlin teams even, Scott, like, they had some struggles almost every single season early on in some way, shape, or form. I mean, think about even the K-State home game last year for the Iowa women. 2 years ago, they went through kind of a rough stretch, actually, early in the season. They lost at Illinois. They had, I think it was NC State they lost to at home, if I remember correctly. It just was. I think they lost to Duke. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I'm mixing up the years now.
They blend together. Yeah, no question.
Yeah, but they always picked it up at this time of year, and so we've seen Iowa win 4 of the last 6 Big Ten tournaments. I'm not predicting that by any means, but this is a team that definitely could make a run in Indianapolis, and the way they're playing right now, because they just have the freshmen are coming along. They know their roles and they seem comfortable with those roles. I wrote about Kylie Feuerbach last week and how she's become kind of the defensive stopper of the team, and she's really embraced that role. She shut down Britt Prince of Nebraska, who scored 22 the first time, scored 5 the other night. None of them when Kylie was on the floor. Lucy Olson obviously is probably the biggest story right now. I mean, worst performance of the season in the second half against Oregon has turned that into an incredible 6-game stretch. She played all 40 minutes Monday against Nebraska. 32 points, a high for her time at Iowa here. And so she's averaging 22.6 assists in this 5-game win streak. So, and they can make it 6 against Rutgers. So I just like the way they're playing a lot. It just looks like a Bluter coach team, and I'm happy for Jan Jensen that she's kind of weathered some of the early season storm to get to this point.
Right. I think the most important factor of this is Lucy Olson has become the player that Iowa expected to get. When she was really inconsistent and she's missing all of her shots in the fourth quarter, or she did a couple weeks ago, that put a lot of stress on everybody. But the way she has played with confidence, and she's hitting outside shots, she's driving, she's doing distributing, she's doing everything, playing great defense. The way she's playing allows everybody to fit in their roles nicely and weather it, even if they get in obscene foul trouble, which is unbelievable the way that some of those calls were made on Monday night. I'm like, I saw some bad officiating before, I think the LSU game in the championship was right at the top of the list. And this one was just like, are you kidding me? Really? you're going to try to foul everybody out by halftime, so I think by her being able to play like the player that she wants to be, that she was brought here to be, I think has allowed everybody to settle down. And off of that, the byproducts are you're seeing Sydney Affolter be that good senior story, and she's just a junkyard dog. She always has been, but now she can take that role and make it even better because she gets all the rebounds. Every rebound on the floor she gets. They're hers first, and then everybody else gets scraps. Hannah, when she's in there, is playing better at the 5. Addie O'Grady has improved her game. Kylie Feuerbach has been a great on-ball defender with kind of a 3-and-D, the way Gabby Marshall was at times. Everybody feeds off Lucy. And it's taken the stress away from Jan because, 5 weeks ago, I don't know, I'm sure you did too, but I had people digging up my tweets from when she got hired. And I had one, I won't use the word that I would off the air, digs up a tweet from like May, and, where I said she was the right choice for the job. And they're like, oh, was she really? You know what? She's a new coach in an incredibly deep league, has 4 starters, that left, including the greatest player in college basketball history. They're still struggling to adapt, and they're losing very close games. Their only double-digit loss came in overtime. So, come on, you're not going to stand behind your team. You're not going to support your team. But your point is well taken about late season strengths for this program. It mirrors the football program in that regard, because it's from 2019 onward, Iowa football is 21-2 since Nate Stanley's blow up at the half-yard line. After that game on, 21-2. The losses were Nebraska here when Spencer Petras got hurt, and then out in California when Sullivan got hurt.
You're talking about November games.
November games.
Yes, and this is like February basketball or March.
February basketball is when they start to really peak and take off, and it shows great coaching. And I know people may take issue with that when I'm talking football, but I don't really care. It's great. It's great. They've got great coaches and they coach well.
Yeah.
Same thing with women's basketball. Lisa Bluter has always proved it. Jan Jensen's proved it. The players believe in them. They compete, and then they compete and get better through the course of the season. And, I think it might be unfair to kind of not mention Fran in this category. I think a healthy Fran, the Franuary fade that everybody has talked about, that was pretty much bogus. I mean, the fact is they're playing really good teams, and sometimes they lose a few more games. But specifically with this women's basketball team, you're seeing a confident team playing at a really high level, and it's been fun to watch. Taylor McCabe have a great game in her home state, a place that she owned as a high schooler, and then just everybody else contributing, even getting AJ Edgar in the game at the end of the first half just to get a body in there who could absorb a foul, and then she was a fraction of a second late getting up that shot, but right. Everybody owns a part of it, and that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, that was a excellent not rant, but just sort of monologue there, Scott. I like that. I wanted to follow up on the Jan Jensen point, actually, because during the losing streak, we saw Jan be pretty animated and almost like you could tell she was just really under pressure, like stressed.
Yeah.
And I know she kind of communicated that a little bit as well. Just, I think she was just feeling the weight of wanting to win so bad, and they weren't getting it over the finish line. I mean, you think about the free throws against Nebraska, free throws against Illinois. They blew a 9-point fourth quarter lead at Michigan State a while back. All of these games. Oh, and then the Oregon game, they're up 11 in the second half, lose by 1. She doesn't even have Lucy on the floor most of that fourth quarter because she just was so ineffective and struggling. And, it's tough on her. And you could tell her almost histrionics on the sideline were not really like of her nature. I think she was just really adjusting herself. And I think I think you made a great point about the Lucy Olson calming everything down type of thing, because she's now being that player, like you said. And I thought I was most impressed. I was impressed with a lot of stuff Monday night with the foul adversity that was happening. I guess it was, someone said on TV, I was obviously there, but like Addie O'Grady after that clean block on Markowski was like, what the beep?
Yeah.
And I watched that replay, and it was like the cleanest, most beautiful block ever. And it's a shame that she doesn't get credit for a block shot,
right,
on that against the best player on Nebraska's team. But anyway, Jan Jensen stayed calm as a leader in that situation, because she could have gone ballistic many times, and I was kind of impressed that she didn't. And they all just kind of kept their cool. Every time that happened, it seemed like somebody would hit a three, a Fulcher, and McCabe hit back-to-back threes late in the third quarter, and that kind of finally felt like, you know what, F you refs, we're just going to take over this game. And then they go to the fourth quarter up 14, and double-digit lead hadn't been safe against Nebraska before, but this time they made it safe. So, like I said, that's a very tangible sign of progress that I saw on Monday.
Very much. You could see the maturity of the team, that they feel like they could compete in those situations. They lost some of them, but I think the confidence that they've gained through some of these victories. You were out at Washington. That was as great of an overall performance as you could have. And you could just see it visibly on television, and you probably saw it in person, but it was just like a giant exhale, collective exhale, like, wow, see what we can do when we're really right. We're making all these shots. We feel really good. We're having fun. We're doing it the way we want to do it. And then, to come back, Northwestern was, a choppy game. They got, right off the bat, they took a pretty good shot from Northwestern, which is I think still winless. And, but they, that Iowa is a name brand in women's basketball. And so they feel like, hey, we'll flex our rivalry muscles here a little bit. But the USC game, to be able to come back, so holistically, this they're in a great spot for this program right now because we know that they're in on some amazing recruits in 26. And to be able to not only bring them to the biggest atmosphere of the season in women's college basketball and produce a win on the day of Caitlin Clark with Juju Watkins against, and all these factors involved, Chad. But I think when you look at that, and then you see that they're building upon that. They're winning games. They're competing. They're beating, a really good Minnesota team. They beat, a team in Nebraska, and they had areas where they could really exploit Iowa. Minnesota takes great care of the basketball. Iowa's had issues with turnovers, yet Iowa was able to minimize that issue and exploit Minnesota's lack of offense. Likewise, against Nebraska. Nebraska has been, one of the best teams in the country when it comes to shooting threes. Iowa flipped it, and Iowa was the better team shooting threes and really minimized the damage that Nebraska could do there. So I think when you can take somebody's strength and turn it into their weakness and exploit them, that shows growth as a team and a program. And having, 6 games left, Rutgers tonight, you would think, that they have a shot at some pretty good success tonight. It gets tough the next 2 games at Ohio State, a team that there's a strong rivalry between these two programs. And going on the road and playing on President's Day, a matinee on President's Day is going to be a challenge. And then, of course, UCLA at home. But that you get almost a week to prepare for Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice. That's, number 1 team in the country. Go out there and let it all hang out, right? but then their final 3 games, or final two. At Michigan and Wisconsin, you feel like Michigan, if you play well, you should win. Yeah. If you don't, you're on the road. It can be a close game, a fight. And then Wisconsin, again, they have one player who's really good, and then the rest of the team is, not very good. So to be kind. Yeah.
It's I think the short-term goal here is just obviously you can't lose to Rutgers, so you got to get that done. You don't want to unwind some progress here. I feel good about that, but again, based on all the things we just said, good February team typically, but you still got to get it done. You got to perform. It's the ultimate trap game, really, because you had 3 huge games here in a row. And then you got 2 or 3, I guess, on deck right after this. So This is the one you're supposed to win. If you look at Rutgers scores, like they've been a little bit feisty in some of these games. They've gotten blown out sometimes, but they've got 2 really good players. And so, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But 6:30 BTN Plus. Most of these last games are on streaming services. So get your subscriptions figured out, folks. One last point on just kind of the team part, and I know this is very obvious because it became a very key storyline, but I thought one of the most, I guess, beautiful stories from the win was the fact that Ava Hayden was a DNP for 3 straight games, and then there she is in the first quarter getting pulled into action because Stuelke and O'Grady have 2 fouls. You guys all know this, but I feel like the fact that she, did not sulk, was ready, was taking the coaching. You could see how she did that she played like a mini Monica Sonano. I mean, getting the ball on the post and going straight to the rim without dribbling, scored 3 times in the second quarter. And that was important because they had foul trouble and they went to half with the lead. They built the lead to like 9 with the freshman out there, which was after Nebraska had tied it up. And they had Lucy and the 4 freshmen out there, and they extended the lead to 9. So I just thought that was just a sign of like everyone accepting their roles, being ready when the roles are needed. And, I just felt in my heart that at some point Ava Hayden's talent would be needed. And in this case it was. And it's a good sign of the depth this team has. I mean, you got a platoon at the 5 spot right now, and you got a third person if you need it. It's kind of like having a righty lefty in baseball, and then you still got another guy on the bench if one of those guys gets hurt. It's like a really, it's a nice luxury to have there. So just really just like how everyone's fitting into their roles, and just kind of excited to see how this turns out. Last thing on women, I guess, is just, it just feels like it's, I don't want to spike the football yet on this season, but it feels like it has been a successful story for this team. Where it is right now. They could lose their last 5 or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I feel like year 1 under Jensen, with the way they've responded, is really close to being branded a success.
Right. I would say if they can take care of business over their last 5, and just ballparking, if they go 3-2, go to the Big Ten tournament and win at least one, and go to the NCAA tournament and win at least one, then I think you've got a really good season because of all the changes that they had, yet they were able to reach that destination. Because when they were 2-6, Chad, we could start to look and go, wow, I don't know if they're going to make the even the Big Ten tournament. I mean, they got to play USC. They've got to play at Wisconsin. At Minnesota and Nebraska and Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, gosh, it can really spiral out of control. And yet, through good coaching, good leadership, players doing the right thing at the right time of the game, and playing with confidence, it's something that I think they can look at and say, this was a successful year. And you can't judge, in a program like Iowa, you can't judge success on the final outcome. It's not fair to where the program is. And, okay, you went to the national title game 2 years in a row. That's different, but you're not going to have that every year. Now, if you perform at that level this year and you get to 20-ish, more than 20 wins, 23 wins or something like that, or 22 wins, and you get to at least the round of 32, that you're probably going to lure in a couple of really high level recruits. And then you're going to say, now we're really doing well. And your point about the freshmen, Chad, they've all reached their freshman moments of adversity in different ways. I mean, there's been inconsistency. You've seen Taylor Stremlow at times has been the best player on the floor, and at times has really played like a freshman. You see Aaliyah Guyton a few weeks ago. She was playing better than everybody, and then she's kind of tailed off and struggled at different times. As you mentioned, Ava Hayden hasn't played a whole ton lately, but was able to go in and play well when she did. I thought she played well at Oregon too. And then, Tegan Malini has played well at times, and then other times has kind of struggled. But through their adversity, they came through really strong the other day. I mean, like Tegan Malini, I was probably as impressed with her as anybody, because she has been probably on the wrong side of success in some ways through a lot of the course of the year. But when they needed her, she came through because she had experienced it. And I think that's bodes well for the future. We don't know when Addie Deal gets here, Journey Houston gets here, some of the players in the next 26, what their trajectory is as far as how they're going to play. But I think they're going to be valuable contributors at a minimum. And if not, really solid starters and high-level players.
Well, Michigan beat Indiana Wednesday night in women's basketball. So now the Hawkeyes are in a 5-way. They were in 13th place. Yeah, 13th place. Now they've risen to a tie for 8th in the Big Ten standings at 7-6. 5-way tie with Minnesota, Nebraska, Oregon, and Indiana. Obviously, they lost the head-to-heads with Indiana and Oregon. Yeah. Split with Nebraska in the only 2 play. And, of course, beat Minnesota head-to-head. And they're 2 games behind 7th place Michigan. Am I doing that right?
Michigan is 8-5 now, and Iowa's
9-5. They won. They beat.
Oh, they're 9-5.
Yeah, because they beat Indiana. So at least the standings I'm looking at. So yeah, they're anyway. I think the ceiling's probably 7th, probably in the regular season for Iowa, unless it just runs the table. Goes and beats Ohio State, beats UCLA, something like that. But let's say they go 3-2. The ceiling's probably 7th place or 8th for the Big Ten tournament. 8-9 would not be the greatest draw for a long run. But I think anything else you would take, probably not going to be able to climb much higher than 7 because some of those teams in that upper crust are Maryland, Michigan State, Illinois, who you lost to all of them. So that's going to be tough to pass them. Not saying it's impossible. Probably the one team maybe you could catch, which is still very unlikely, would be Ohio State, but you'd have to beat them to do that. Yeah. So we'll see. Should be fun. I'll be at the Big Ten tournament for sure with my teammate Dargan Southard at the register, and hope we're there for a long run. That's always a lot more fun to cover. So
especially being in Indianapolis. So I'll be there for the men. So
nice. All right. Well,
but I'll be doing other things. But,
hey, it sounds like the Hawks probably going to be there. So maybe you'll see the Hawks go on a run, or maybe see Fran's last game at Iowa. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. We'll hang out.
Well, I want to say thank you to GameDay Men's Health and encourage you to pay them a visit. If you haven't already, hope you have. GameDay Men's Health, obviously, as we've told you time and time again, can help you feel like you're in your 20s again. They really pushing these weight loss plans, trying to get people to get healthier. And if you don't want to go that route exactly, I can say firsthand that another way you can keep your weight down and trim weight is to go through the testosterone replacement therapy. It gives you more energy to exercise harder, and like I said before, makes us old dudes, we lose T over time, but GameDay Men's Health can safely reverse that trend, get your testosterone levels back to where they were in your 20s, and I'm serious about that. So improve your energy, your mood, your performance on and off the field with GameDay Men's Health, which has by the way, with all the snow Wednesday, I missed my tee shot, but I called them. I'm like, what do I do? They're like, just come into our Ankeny office on Thursday if you want. Not the end of the world if you have to wait an extra day or two. So it's very simple to all work it out. It's just like chill. It's easy. It's no obligation. Once you do the consultation, all that stuff, GameDay Men's Health does it right. So check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Visit their Ankeny location, their West Des Moines location, or North Liberty location where Scott Dochterman goes. I know you went there the other day. You were texting me all about
it. Yeah, I was texting him. I won't say why, but yeah.
nothing creepy or anything.
No, nothing creepy.
Just kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
Inside joke. Yeah. All right, Scott, you wrote a great piece. I read it all on the finances of Big Ten schools, and go from kind of something I've been really passionate about this year, women's basketball, to something you're just digging into right now. And so I'm going to lean on you here for this, finances across the Big Ten. Take it away.
Yeah, this is something that it's a kind of a thing I do every year, which is I go through each school. I obtain it through, sometimes it's available. Sometimes you got to go through Freedom of Information Act or state open records laws to obtain these in-depth financial statements for each school. And it'd be 16 of the Big Ten because Northwestern and USC are private schools, so they are exempt from providing that. But I'm fascinated by different aspects of it. And so I spent a lot of time trying to cross-compare debt, how much schools spend on certain areas, like recruiting, the coaching salaries, gate receipts for sports, women, not only women's sports, but Olympic caliber sports. And there were really some things that kind of shed some light. And I think I'm going to start a little bit here with football gate receipts in the Big Ten. And last year, or this is actually the 24 fiscal year, which means in football, the 23 football season. And Michigan led the way with $50 million in ticket sales, whereas Ohio State and Penn State each had north of $44 million. So that's not anything unusual. Iowa was in the neighborhood of, $22.5 million. That's about right for them normally. There's always this kind of bunch after the top three, and that's still included. Like Washington jumped up from normal, but Oregon, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Washington, Michigan State are kind of in that next tier, not too far from one another. And then from there, then it's kind of like Minnesota's next, and then it drifts all the way down to kind of the worst of the bunch, UCLA, less than 8.5 million, and then Maryland, 7.2 million in football ticket sales. And that's really a disturbing trend for them, in today's world. And part of that to me also goes into the coaching salaries, because schools have to pay these coaching salaries. And when you have money, Iowa among them, to spend on coaches, you do better. There is a direct correlation. And that year, the top 5 teams spending money on their staffs, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, Iowa, all had at least 10 wins. There is a correlation between having good football staffs and success on the field. And then you look at the ones that spent the least, which was Purdue, 10 million, UCLA, less than 12. Both those staffs are gone. So that's why you've got, issues here. And then likewise, when you look at, and this one got trimmed from the final, but among support staffs for football, it's Penn State, Ohio State, Washington, and Iowa were the top 4. And they all, again, 10 plus win seasons. So coaching and recruiting, or coaching and gate receipts kind of go hand in hand out of this. So that's kind of the first point I want to kind of throw out there.
Yeah, it is. What do you think about? I mean, I guess we knew that. I mean, Ferentz has always really taken care of his assistant coaches, and I think that's a really. The more I kind of understand how Ferentz runs his program, it's like, well, that's the smartest way to do it. Like, keep Phil Parker, keep him happy, keep Seth Wallace happy, retain your coach, Kelvin Bell. I mean, how valuable is he to right. I'm honestly surprised that you can keep somebody as talented as him and who can recruit like him. And, he can make you run through a brick wall, it feels like, and right. And I just feel like that Ferentz has just done a really good job with that staff continuity. I mean, whether you like some of the assistants he's had over the years or not, I mean, I think you have to just give a lot of credit to, we're going to get to maybe one of Phil Parker's best players ever here in a little bit. But, there's a reason that Iowa plays so consistently on that side of the ball. It's because they have that continuity from Phil Parker, Seth Wallace, Calvin Bell. Jay Neiman's now been here a while. I mean, just stuff like that. I feel like it is valuable. Costs money. But I think that's where Ferentz sees that value in that. So what else, Scott?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one thing I wanted to bring up, because it's been interesting to me over time, is to chart Iowa's football recruiting costs have never added up to everybody else. Like the recruiting costs over a 2-year period collectively among those 16 schools have soared 56%, from 19.35 million just 2 years ago to 30 million. And a lot of, almost every school had really jumped except Iowa, and Iowa was by far the lowest. So I had to kind of investigate why. Is there something I'm missing here, or you guys just don't care about recruiting, which I know is not the case. But, you got to kind of throw that out there. And it's like, no, what we do differently here is we categorize, recruiting software expenses into other, which, like Iowa's other category when it comes to this is like 3 million, which is so far beyond. Like Oregon spends 900,000, they spend 3 million. So that's really where it goes. Their costs are not that different from anybody else's in the Big Ten and in their stratosphere. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. Now, if we want to look at a different category though, and that's men's basketball receipts, and Indiana led the way. And this is kind of interesting to me. They had $10 million that year in football gate receipts, and they had 15.2 in men's basketball.
Wow.
So
That's astounding, especially when you look at Iowa men's basketball, for examples, in the 3 million neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at Illinois is next, and it's kind of the inverse of football in some ways. Illinois is next at 9.3 and change. Purdue more than 8. Michigan State close to 8, and UCLA was almost 7. So you do the inverse for what's a basketball school, what's a football school. Michigan State probably being in the opposite category or the crazy category there, but then Iowa dropped $600,000 year over year into that year, and that's not this year, which we know is going to be lower. It just is. And now UCLA had a big revenue drop too, but but the thing that's kind of tough about Iowa, they're 12th among those 16 teams in ticket revenue, and they were just ahead of like Penn State, Washington, Oregon, and I can't remember the other one. And behind Nebraska, they're behind a lot of other schools, and they haven't hit 4 million in gate revenue since 2005. And so you're looking at a 20-year period where they have had not only no growth, but really losing. In this case, over 20 years, they're down 26%. That's significant. I mean, because peer programs in basketball, when we were younger, 2+ decades ago, Illinois, Michigan State, Indiana was always above everybody else. Purdue, though, Iowa's well below them in this category. And, we've talked about all the reasons why and all our hypotheticals, but the numbers are the numbers, and that's significant either way. So,
yeah, let's just I actually like to. I know we started positive with men's basketball, but I do want to dig into that just temporarily here because you're right. I was just taking into one of those numbers, a couple of those numbers pretty recently too. Yeah, so even from from the Chris Murray season to last season was a drop of 14%, I believe, in ticket sales plus concession / parking. If you add those two totals together and those year over year, you lost. I mean, that's a 14% drop just from, and the attendance really wasn't that big of a drop. It was about a 10% drop in attendance ish in terms of announced attendance. By the way, I have the scans for Iowa basketball this year, and it's ugly. It's been 4 games under 3,000, including one Big Ten game. So what I'm saying is, that those revenues are going to go down and down further. So again, when it comes time for Beth Getz to make a decision here, there's real dollars. And then think of all the, if there's 3,000 scans, now the average is closer to 5 per game, which still is very low, a third of Carver's capacity. But think about all the empty brown seats, though. 10,000 empty seats that you're not having someone's not buying a hot dog or not buying a Franderloin, or whatever, or not buying a T-shirt. Yeah. Parking, they're not paying for parking. There's just so much loss by not having someone in those seats at all. And so that's something that, hey, even if it's just something you have to weigh in terms of the finance, and you're talking about finances here. It's not easy to be in the black here. Iowa was about $3 million in the black, I think, this past cycle, right? FY24. They were about plus $3 million total revenues versus expenses, which is good because they're self-sustaining. That's a positive. But you can't just keep going. You got $20.5 million coming in rev share. So you can't just keep, throwing away $500,000, $1 million every year in men's basketball. So again, it's not all wins and losses. It's not all everything, but there is a real tangible money cost to not having fans in Carver Hawkeye Arena that affects coaching staffs, who you can hire, your bottom line, how you can pay athletes. So it is important. I know it can be a boring topic to listen to, but it is important.
It's important. There's no other way around it. I mean, when you're in the Big Ten, it's more than just coaching and wins and losses. Maybe other schools can kind of get away with it in different leagues, mid-major leagues, whatever. That's neither here nor there. In the Big Ten, it's a business, and you've got to be successful at your business. And when you're seeing this 2-decade drop in revenues at a program that was significant, it never reached the level of Iowa football in revenue by any stretch, but it was a clear handoff to where it was in the neighborhood of about a third of the revenue. And now you're talking about a fraction. I mean, not just ticket sales, but I mean, all things being told, it's, 10% or less. And that's and this is a typical revenue sport. This is the only other revenue sport Iowa has. And so you got to take that in consideration. It's a business first. The game is the game, but the business is more important. And then, another area that I think is important, especially as much as we've talked about women's sports, is that gate showings have a direct impact in team performance. Now, you take 2 steps back and go, duh. But but the reality is 4 programs sold more than $1 million worth of tickets in the Big Ten and among women's sports. You had in volleyball, you had Nebraska at more than almost 2.6 million, Wisconsin at more than 1.6 million. They were in the Final Four that year for women's volleyball. In women's basketball, you had Iowa, which was 3.2 million. And then you had
they could have charged more.
They could have charged more.
Yeah, they should have. But
then Indiana women's basketball got to that level. And we know Iowa went to the championship game, and we know that Indiana that year, it was last year, got to the Sweet 16.
They were supposed to be better, yeah.
Yeah, and they lost a 4-point game to South Carolina in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, right. That was a good game. Yeah.
They played South Carolina the best. So that correlation is obvious. And, we don't really need to talk about hockey because it's not a sport here, but the only 2 non-revenue sports that produced revenue, men's hockey for Minnesota and Nebraska women's volleyball. And Nebraska continues to be that outlier because women's basketball doesn't have its own media contract. And that's a real factor for, it really deserves more than what it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and even more than the NCAA units. If I were the Big Ten, based on what we've seen from Caitlin Clark to now, with what these teams have done, and I'm sure they're the USC Iowa game produced the largest viewership outside of a play-in from the NFL that you had all year. I mean, at 1 million viewers. This is a product you can sell by itself. It doesn't need to be grouped in as an add-on to men's basketball. So that to me is something that shows growth. Wrestling is another one. Iowa and Penn State are, over $1 million. Iowa will be a number 1, Penn State 2. Of course, Iowa finished 5th, which is like fourth loser to them. But still, it's an impactful program. And then, the last thing I kind of want to touch on, Chad, on this category has to do with kind of overall revenues and expenses. And it's interesting because out of the 16 schools, 8 actually lost money. And several.
I was really stunned by some of the margins that some of these programs lost money in your story, Scott.
Yeah. I mean, UCLA, and over a 5-year period, is $200 million. And they're covered by the school, which is University of California at Los Angeles. And you just wonder, they've got to do something about this. And now that they've got to pay athletes and they're in LA and they've had issues. So that is something, of course, they had to make the move to the Big Ten in order to get revenue right off the bat. And then you look at, some of the others that are, Maryland has struggled. They're making their way. They're not bad. Rutgers is falling apart again. Michigan State has been kind of inconsistent, really back and forth. And then Ohio State lost a lot of money, but a lot of that is due to only having 6 football games versus 8.
That was so interesting. Yeah. I couldn't believe how much they spend on sports.
Well, they have 36 sports.
Yeah, I know, but it's still, was it like 280 million or something?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, wow. 292, I think it is.
292, geez.
Yeah, and in their case, that's going to be, they are the most interesting school in the country when it comes to paying athletes coming up, especially now with the DOE rescinding the guidelines that sent out at the end of the Joe Biden tenure of, about Title IX, because with all those sports, they're not going to pay all those athletes. If you're on the rifle team, you're going to be paying yourself is what's going to happen. Because they're going to be paying football and they're going to be paying other sports.
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to.
But as we know, Chad, with the DOE, this rescindment, I mean, this is going to end up in court. It's going to end up at the Supreme Court at some point. But just I'll let everybody know. But, the previous guideline from the previous administration, given about 3 days before the end of the tenure, was that the DOE said that you had to pay your athletes based on Title IX, which was proportionate to your female-male student ratio. And Iowa's at like 54% female students. So they would have to, out of that $20.5 million pool, they'd have to apply 54% to female athletes. Well, as of yesterday, Tuesday, the 11th of February, that was rescinded by this administration, which means it goes back to what the original plan was for most of these schools, that they can pay them pretty much whatever they want. And we know that that's going to generate a lawsuit no matter what happens with the House settlement in April. And, it's going to be marketability versus gender equity / Title IX. So for Iowa, it has to happen this way. It has to go by marketability, and for other schools too. But and jump in here if you feel like I'm out of line here. But I think that for an Iowa, if you could provide $15 million to your football players, you're fine. You're in good shape. You can recruit anybody you really want or who will consider you. If you could only have $9.8 million to spend on your entire men sport, then you're going back to Collectiveville, and everybody's doing the same thing. And then it's about who's going to jack up, who's going to a booster, who's going to pay $7 million to bring in these athletes. Then it becomes a much more challenging situation. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I'm with you. I mean, the new or the Trump era guidelines benefit Iowa in this, to be competitive in football, more so just because I do feel like it levels the playing field more, because Iowa can't, Beth Getz said they're going to max it out. And I wonder, as I look at your story, Scott, like, can Maryland max out? Can Rutgers max out? I don't know if they've said this, but I mean, that seems like, or can UCLA max out? I mean, the fact that Iowa can max out and then presumably give 14 million to football or 15 million to football, which is kind of seems like the standard here set by the SEC. I would assume they're going to try to follow that. But that's a real benefit for Iowa in this new era. So now if it ends up being the other way, then I think women's basketball at the University of Iowa is going to be getting all the best players in the country if you can pay, because if you have 12 million of your 20 or 21 or whatever, or 11 million of your 21, I would give 10 and a half of that to women's basketball. I mean, I'm not joking.
Mm-hmm. I know. And each of these programs, I think what's going to be very interesting for me to follow is each of these individual athletic departments will have to decide, not Sophie's choice here, but just saying, okay, how much of this goes to what program? What do we expect to be good in? And what do we feel like we're going to provide this opportunity, and the players will take it for what it's worth? And at Iowa, Iowa's traditionally tried to be good in a lot of programs, and they've been successful at that historically. But I think you look at women's basketball is one that you feel like in on the women's side you have to be good at. Does field hockey enter that discussion? You've been good at that, but do you want to be good? I mean, financially want to be elite. Same thing with softball or volleyball. And I would say that if I'm making this decision, and if I was to go through that order, I would start with women's basketball without question. And then I would invest heavily in softball, because I think that there's a lot of really good softball in this area that when Gail Blevins was let go retired, that they scattered. I think that's one that Iowa can turn into a real positive program. That would be number 2 for me. I don't know the volleyball that they could get a whole lot of traction right now with the way
Big Ten's so tough.
Yeah. Not that you want to be a bottom feeder forever, but you've got to make choices. Yeah. And it's like, do we want to win a Big Ten championship in women's basketball when we're there and everybody's watching us, or, volleyball, okay, Wisconsin, you can have volleyball, we'll take basketball.
Yeah. I mean, when I interviewed Beth at the Music City Bowl, she was not ready to give numbers, obviously, since it hasn't been finalized or whatever. But she did have a comment in there about, women's basketball. We're competing for top 20 national recruits, and so that's the reality. So if they want to live in that world, and obviously they do, Kate Harpring was here a couple weeks ago, and Finley Chastain, and all these other, Addison Bjorn, all these top prospects nationally. You cannot lose this momentum you have in women's basketball by trying to go cheap on it. And I don't think Beth will, based on the comments she told me, but I just think you have to almost overcompensate, because you cannot lose the momentum that you've developed. And it's all quality, it's like, this is such a quality program with quality people. You recruit quality women. It just makes the whole state feel good. You cannot risk jeopardizing what you've really, built. It wasn't just Caitlin. This is this is Gustafson. This is Bluter, Logic. Just keep going back and into the years. But Caitlin allowed it all to just explode. But the culture has been here, and so you don't want to lose that. So whatever it is, women's basketball needs to be top of market against whatever else South Carolina is doing, LSU, whatever.
And then it spills over to the men's side too, which is, what are you going to do about men's basketball? That other schools value it to the point to where they will take money away from football, like a Purdue, I would guess, and Indiana, potentially Illinois, UCLA, Maryland, that they will slide money towards men's basketball because they feel like they have to be good there. And you're fighting an uphill battle. That doesn't mean you can't be any good. I think Fran has shown that they can be a very competitive program, but can you get over the top? And then you come down to the really tough choices, which are $500,000. Do they go to men's basketball? Does it go to women's basketball? Does it go to wrestling? Because at Iowa, wrestling has to be good. It and Penn State and I'm sure Oklahoma State feel that way, that we're investing for national championships and that's it. So we have to put money in there. But then what does that leave for baseball? You want to be good there. And in the South, they are. So this is what the interesting dynamic is, that unlike 10 years ago.
It's tough. Yeah.
So you're just going to have to make these choices. And Iowa's going to have to, frankly, look at it and go, we can either go for national titles in baseball or wrestling. We have great coaches in both sports. Two of the best in the country, in my opinion. But if you can only pick one, wrestling is probably the one you go with, and it sucks. But Minnesota's got the same choice with ice hockey, and Nebraska's value system for volleyball is going to be very high. Wisconsin will be the same way, and they have ice hockey, and how are they going to do that with basketball? And they don't have baseball, but just stuff like that.
It's fascinating. Yeah. I can't wait to find out what it is. Like, it's tough. It's a tough situation for Beth. I mean, God, I hate to say this, but I'd almost be inclined to just chip into football a little bit just because they've always won with a little bit less, maybe you get by with 13 million instead of 14
for football.
Yeah.
You would take from football?
I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there. Like consider it. If it's 13 versus 14 million.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would.
I'm not saying like do it, but I'm just saying you're talking about all these other sports you want to be competitive at. You're going to have to give up something if you don't.
I would just say if you want to set a percentage cap for football, you get 70%. I wouldn't go below that because everybody else is going to spend too. And if that means, when you get down to a football game, as precious as those games are, because there's only 12 of them, and it's 3rd and 4, and Minnesota bought the left tackle, you didn't, and they were able to hold your guy off, and they were able to complete that pass and kick the field goal.
Right.
And I know I'm making it simplistic, or the receiver or the tight end that goes to Notre Dame instead of Iowa, and your tight end isn't as good. It's just football has to be a moneymaker. Yeah. It has to be good, and this is beyond Ferentz too. This is for your next coach and beyond. So
true. All I'm saying is you can find. Iowa is masterful at finding the guys that no one else is recruiting, or they slow play the guys, like a Cooper DeJean. Scott, they're a master at finding these, the Chad Greenways. You just go down the line, all the guys that they've turned from 2 stars, 3 stars, slightly recruited into studs. But last thought here, we've run super long here on, but hopefully you guys stuck with us. What was your thought when Cooper DeJean picked off Patrick Mahomes as we predicted and scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl to basically tell the world, okay, the Chiefs aren't going to three-peat?
Yeah, I mean, without getting into the team debate of who I wanted to win versus lose, whatever, it was one of the more exciting moments that I've experienced watching the Super Bowl. And the older I get and the more I'm around people, it's about rooting for the people we've covered. Yes, we're Bears fans and we want the Bears to win, but I'm not to the point of rooting against somebody that I wrote about and talked to and visited at their home and everything like that. And to see Cooper DeJean, a rookie from little Odebolt, Iowa, pick off a pass and do what he did 3 times 2 years ago and did 2 times with an asterisk his final year at Iowa. It was one of the more exciting moments. I mean, it was like, yes, and I'm sure, forgive me for having a little bit of an outburst at home for him. And I imagine I was not alone in the state of Iowa for people, even Cyclone fans were probably excited for it.
I mean, it is just an unbelievable story from a small town kid, a small town Iowa kid to Super Bowl. And still, I mean, he should have been a Hawkeye senior this year. He would have been a true senior. So really young guy and neat guy. And just good. We had Phil Parker on the Hawk Central show this week. Hope you guys check that out. But it was fun to talk to him about Cooper and kind of how he played that ball. How Iowa, you could see the Phil Parker, Seth Wallace, how they teach defense. Eyes on the quarterback, studying film. He knew Mahomes when he rolled out, liked to throw across the middle. And Phil said on an interview, he thought he baited him a little bit. He thought he baited Patrick Mahomes via film study and eyes on the quarterback. And I think that's beautiful too.
And he has the ball skills to catch it. And then the open field running ability to score. And he showed it. It was an incredible moment. And to be able to get in the end zone, I was kind of worried there about the 3-yard line. He was going to get dusted. And,
I was worried for like an instant. I was like, it's Cooper DeJean.
Yeah.
Like at Rutgers in 2022.
Right.
And then how about that? Like the same spot crossing the goal line as he did in the wasn't a fair catch score, right at the right corner pylon down there.
Yeah.
That same direction.
Exactly. And it didn't get called back on replay. That was a good thing. And What a moment, and people have kind of asked me, is that, where does that rate among former Hawkeyes in the Super Bowl, and bring up undoubtedly Tim Dwight, who's somebody he's been compared with as an athlete, and I know Tim was faster, straight ahead speed, but I think Cooper is a better, more athletic in different areas. I think Cooper's touchdown is a better play because it happened in a competitive part of the game. No, not taking anything away from Tim Dwight getting 210 kickoff return yards, but they got smoked in that bowl game or that Super Bowl game, and he got a 94-yard kickoff return. I'm sure people were very excited at that moment too. But the only one that I compare with Cooper is probably Bob Sanders against our Bears. And he had an interception. He returned it 38 yards. He had a forced fumble and an impactful part of the game. I think it was when the Bears were leading. And he also had 3 tackles. And then just the way he changed the team for that playoffs, because he was out all but 4 games. And they were last in the NFL in yards per carry allowed. And then up until the Super Bowl throughout the AFC playoffs, none of the teams rushed for more than 100 yards. That just shows you what Bob's capable of doing. And then to throw kind of honorable mentions out there, Wally Hilgenberg had 13 and a half tackles in one game for the Vikings against Ed Podolak's Chiefs. And Paul Krause had 3 games where he had 9 tackles, which kind of shows you if a free safety back then was getting a lot of those tackles, it was not good for a defense. But
man, we got Wally Hilgenberg and Podolak references here. Pretty impressive.
Yeah. Paul Krause and Cooper DeJean, the leading interceptor in NFL history. But,
and Phil Parker again compared him to Niall Kinnick. So, in terms of what he imagines Niall Kinnick would have been like. Just do it all. Could have been any position.
Yeah,
that's Cooper DeJean, man. Phil said he could have started at all 5 defensive back spots. We know that, obviously.
Yeah.
I responded to him. He also could have started a receiver, I said. And he agreed. He agreed. He probably could have started at quarterback that year, too.
Should have started quarterback.
Seriously.
No question he should have started the quarterback that year. No question in my mind. He could have been a 60-minute guy. I mean, he was just, and then some of his comments about 2-on-2 game, he and Caitlin versus, he's like, take anybody, another WNBA star and somebody from their school. They got it. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. But you think about it, Chad, in the last year-ish, going before Caitlin Clark, Niall Kinnick was on a pedestal by himself at the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark has since put her likeness next to his, and we can debate day and night as to who was more impactful, and that's not probably fair to either one. But I think Cooper DeJean on the football field, even before Phil said that was one that I just kept popping up because he did so many different things, from punt to intercept to score touchdowns. And I'm like, Cooper's just kind of in that. And he's, a small town, humble kid. It's just, what a great story. And it's fun to see him get all of his accolade, end up on every single TV show in the country. And
I know, man.
He's smoking a cigar after the game and getting birthday cake from ESPN with Saquon Barkley. I mean, just amazing.
What a day. What a night. Really happy for him. And good stuff, Scott. Good perspective. Can't believe we went so long on kind of a, basketball show,
Wow.
So basketball, finances, and Cooper DeJean. We went an hour 15, Aiden. Really sorry about that.
Yeah. So, thanks, Chad, for being amenable. And I appreciate everybody listening in this week.
All right, for Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow, legends and listeners, every Thursday from the Channel Seed Studios. And I think I'm on the CW pod this week, too, so stay tuned for that, only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.